The day commenced like any other. An elderly gentleman, slender and reserved, pulled up to the service station. They chuckled. They regarded him with disdain. They were unaware that he had traversed the jungle bearing his comrades on his back under enemy fire. They perceived only an elderly man with an aged cap, and subsequently they knocked him to the ground. 60 minutes thereafter, the entire town stood motionless because the man they had belittled, it transpired, was the reason numerous individuals are still alive to experience laughter today. The July sun's intensity shimmered off the roadway as Elijah Monroe maneuvered his dilapidated 1969 Dodge D100 into the corner service station. The vehicle groaned as it came to a halt, its discolored red exterior flaking at the perimeters, the metal marked by time and corrosion, much like the individual who operated it. Elijah, 81, moved with the deliberate cadence of old injuries, a Marine in a previous existence when his name was shouted over radios in the jungles of Vietnam. Now merely a reserved man in worn khaki trousers and a sweat-stained shirt topped with a Marine cap that had endured as much sunlight as conflict. He opened the door with exertion, relying on his walking stick as he alighted. The sound of his polished footwear on the asphalt resonated faintly, unnoticed by all save the shadows. He reached for his billfold, extracted a veteran's discount card, and commenced the unhurried walk to the convenience store. Near the air compressor, four men were casually positioned on sport motorcycles in their 20s, perhaps early 30s, all attired in muscle shirts and displaying tattoos. One of them grinned derisively upon seeing Elijah. "Hey, observe that piece of junk," he called out. "Is that vehicle even roadworthy? It appears to have emerged from a scrapyard." Another one chuckled. "I wager he's still reenacting World War I in that headgear." Elijah showed no reaction. He continued walking. He had once navigated through sniper fire with a malfunctioning radio. Their words scarcely made an impression. Inside the shop, the attendant did not look up from her mobile phone. He paid for his fuel and a bottle of water with precise currency. She uttered a mechanical "enjoy your day" without raising her eyes. Back at the fuel pump, he moved unhurriedly, unscrewing the cap, his hands, once sufficiently steady to disassemble and reassemble a rifle while blindfolded, now quivered slightly with age. He did not perceive their approach until the aroma of cologne and self-importance reached him. "Does that truck even operate anymore?" one biker jeered, circling him. Elijah responded without looking. "Still functions." A certain quality in that quiet self-assurance ignited an undesirable reaction. "Still communicates too," the man retorted, and with a sharp push to the shoulder, sent Elijah falling onto the heated concrete. The elderly man did not exclaim. He simply remained there, silent, motionless, as if appraising something only he comprehended. And the world, for an instant, continued its course. Elijah winced as he pulled himself back into the cab of the truck, one hand braced against the steering wheel, the other pressed to his hip where the pain had bloomed sharp and unrelenting. His breath came shallow, but he didn't curse or complain, that wasn't his way. He drove in silence, not even the radio hummed. The streets of the city blurred past, familiar and indifferent, concrete, glass, and people with heads bowed to their phones. No one saw him, not really. They never did. The truck coughed as he turned down Maple Avenue and coasted into Riley's Auto Garage, a small brick building tucked between a vape shop and a shuttered laundromat. The sign was faded like everything else. Elijah pulled into the shade, cut the engine, and stepped out with a slow grunt. His right knee buckled slightly, but the cane held. Inside, Sean Riley, a wiry man in his early 30s with gel-spiked hair and a perpetual smirk, sat behind a computer counter, watching videos with his feet on the desk. Elijah cleared his throat. Sean glanced up, eyes flicking from the Marine cap to the bleeding scrape on Elijah's knuckles. "To the old Dodge in the lot. Help you?" he asked without moving. "Elijah Monroe," the old man replied. "Got an issue with the engine. Something rattles when I accelerate." Sean sighed theatrically and rose from his seat. He walked outside, gave the truck a half-circle glance, then turned back, shaking his head. "We don't work on antiques," he said flatly. "Can't get parts for these relics anymore. Waste of time." "I'll pay in cash," Elijah offered, already knowing it wouldn't change a thing. Sean shrugged. "Not about the money. It's just not worth fixing. Sometimes it's better to let things go." A mop clinked softly in a nearby bucket. Angela, the janitor, mid-40s, brown skin, tired eyes, paused her cleaning. She watched the exchange silently, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. Elijah nodded once, stiffly. He didn't ask twice. Outside, he opened the driver's door, the hinges groaning like joints past their prime. Angela stepped a little closer but said nothing. Sean was already back behind his screen. As Elijah started the engine, Angela caught his eye. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He offered her a thin, weary smile. "Not your fault." She hesitated. "I saw what happened at the gas station." Elijah said nothing. The engine rattled. Angela spoke again, this time firmer. "They don't know who you are." "Don't need to," he replied. "Doesn't change how they see me." And with that, he eased the truck back into gear and rolled away from the garage. Down the road, the pain returned. Not from the fall, not from the hip, but from the slow, steady realization that perhaps what hurt most wasn't being pushed. It was being invisible. The sun had commenced its descent behind the structures as Elijah maneuvered his truck beneath a contorted oak tree at Holloway Park. It was not an impressive place. A fractured walkway, a corroded climbing frame, and a timber bench that had experienced superior eras. Yet it was tranquil and well-known. That was all he ever truly required. He seated himself unhurriedly, his walking stick propped beside him, and delved into his jacket pocket. From a leather pouch, he retrieved a diminutive, aged photograph. 8 men stood aligned, their faces smudged with dirt and beaming, their jungle attire saturated with perspiration and recollections. Their smiles were not directed at the camera. They were for having survived. On the reverse of the photograph, barely discernible through the discolored ink, were the words, "Ghost Platoon, 2nd Recon, Da Nang 71, the ones who returned." Elijah gazed at it, his eyes lingering on a more youthful iteration of himself. Taller, more erect, leaner. The same eyes, however, eyes that had witnessed too much and communicated too little. A contingent of adolescents ambled past on the pavement, their laughter ascending above the quiet. "Hey, observe that elderly zombie over there." One of them jested. His companion added, "I wager he's awaiting a message from Lincoln." The others erupted in laughter. Elijah showed no reaction. He merely refolded the photograph and gently returned it to his pocket. Derision was not unfamiliar. The countenances altered, but the lack of understanding persisted. He reached further into the jacket and extracted a laminated card, yellowed at the perimeters, creased and delicate. Upon it, in block lettering, "Emergency only. Unit V92. Direct contact. No questions asked." He turned it over slowly. A telephone number, no name, no rank. Merely the confidence of a bygone era. He had not telephoned it, not following the conflict, not after the demise of his spouse, not even when his son perished in a vehicular accident 20 years prior. Elijah subscribed to managing affairs independently. Always had. Yet something felt different at present. It was not the tumble. It was not the injured hip or the scraped hand. It was the quietude of the world surrounding him, the manner in which individuals looked past him as if he were an inanimate object, the way benevolence now seemed to necessitate a crisis. Across the park, a little boy vending juice containers took a hesitant step towards him, proffering one, but his mother sharply grasped his arm and drew him back. "Do not disturb him, my dear," she murmured, casting a nervous glance at Elijah as if indigence were infectious. The boy appeared bewildered. Elijah offered a slight wave, but the moment had already passed. He leaned back on the bench, his eyes briefly closed against the clamor of the world. Within him, something long dormant stirred, a notion, a recollection, a name. He had not utilized that number in over 5 decades. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was not too late to recall who he once was. The wind rustled the leaves above Elijah's bench as he stared at the laminated card in his palm. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than ink and plastic, it carried ghosts. He pulled out a battered flip phone from his jacket, the kind no one used anymore except people like him who never cared to upgrade. The buttons were worn smooth and the screen flickered when he flipped it open. It had survived floods, drops, even fire once, just like him. For a long moment he sat motionless, thumb hovering over the keypad. Then slowly he began to dial. The number was etched in his memory. He'd memorized it the same day it was handed to him in a dirt-slick tent half a world away. "Call this only when you're out of options," his old captain had said. "No explanations needed. Just say your name." He pressed the final digit and held the phone to his ear, not anticipating much. One ring, two, three, then a voice responded. "Unit V92, secure line. Verify." Elijah blinked. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged initially. Then something within him, perhaps discipline, snapped into place. "Staff Sergeant Elijah Monroe," he stated, his voice steady. "Call sign Osprey 9. Operation Eclipse, 1971. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. The voice on the line spoke again, lower this time, sharper. "Stand by." The line clicked. For a second, silence returned. Elijah thought it had disconnected. Then a new voice filled the speaker, deep, slow, familiar in a way that made his chest ache. "Monroe? It's been a long time." He sat straighter. "Colonel Hayes." "Still breathing," the man said. "What's your situation?" Elijah closed his eyes for a moment. The years between them vanished. "I need the team," he said quietly. Another pause. No questions, no doubt. Just 3 words, "Help is coming." The line went dead. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, in basements, workshops, and homes across the country, men in their 70s and 80s stood up from their lives, former medics, scouts, commanders. The ones who'd survived with him through the fire and came home to build quiet lives. They didn't hesitate. In a Pennsylvania farmhouse, Corporal Jimmy Riles slid open a cabinet his grandchildren never knew existed. Inside, combat boots, folded fatigues, and a locked box with a silver star on the lid. In Georgia, Captain Dennis Quinn, once the sharpest mind in recon, ended a chess game mid-match. "I have to go," he said to no one in particular. From every corner, they began to move. No uniforms, no orders, just the weight of old promises. Back in Holloway Park, Elijah closed his phone and tucked it away. The sun had begun to set behind the trees, bathing him in gold. He didn't know if they'd come, but for the first time in years, he let himself believe they might. 47 minutes following the call, the initial SUV entered Holloway Park. It was matte black, unremarkable, devoid of sirens or insignia, yet its tires adhered to the road with military exactitude, and it moved with the quiet assurance of a vehicle that did not require an announcement of its intent. The American flag emblem on the license plate's corner was the sole subtle indication of its identity. 3 minutes thereafter, a second SUV materialized from the opposing direction. Then a third, a fourth. By the time the 5th vehicle glided into place beneath the oaks, the park's perimeter had shifted, subtly yet completely. No clear escape routes remained. Elijah Monroe stayed seated on the identical bench, his walking stick propped beside him, his body as still as stone. He did not turn his head, he had no need to. The positioning, the timing, the silence, they communicated in a language he understood intimately. This was no mere gathering. This was an operation. The old instincts stirred beneath his skin like echoes. His back straightened, his eyes narrowed slightly. They had come. From the SUVs, doors opened in perfect synchrony. Not a single word exchanged. Not an exclamation. Not a superfluous motion. Men emerged, some with gray hair, some balding, some still broad-shouldered beneath civilian jackets, but they walked like soldiers. Each wore a black t-shirt, faintly faded, bearing the insignia of Unit V92, a falcon soaring through a ring of stars. They were not young, but youth was not a prerequisite. A jogger halted mid-stride. A boy dropped his basketball. Parents drew their children closer. The atmosphere shifted, and then, as if on cue, the roar of motorcycle engines shattered the calm. The same 4 bikers from the gas station stormed into the park, oblivious to the new arrivals. They performed donuts near the playground, laughing as grass and dirt kicked up behind them. Elijah didn't move. He simply waited, as he had in ambushes decades ago, when patience signified survival. The moment arrived when the lead biker finally noticed the assembled group. He slowed, frowning as the men converged near Elijah. At their head, a tall man in a plain navy jacket stepped forward. His white beard was neatly trimmed, his posture ramrod straight. He knelt before Elijah. "Staff Sergeant Monroe," he said, his voice resonant. "Unit V-92, reporting as requested." Elijah blinked once. His throat tightened, but he managed to quiet. "Colonel Hayes, you really came." The colonel rose to his feet and turned to the others. "Always," he said. "All of us or none of us." One by one, the rest of the team, medic, tech, sniper, comms, formed a circle around Elijah. No formation was given. It simply happened, like breath returning to a lung. The bikers stood frozen now, the laughter gone. The youngest one took a step back. Elijah, still seated, looked at them for the first time that day, and for once they couldn't look back. Colonel Hayes stepped forward with deliberate calm, his boots crunching lightly against the gravel. His gaze settled on the bikers. No rage, no threat, just the focused stillness of a man who had seen real war and recognized childish violence when he saw it. The leader of the group, a wiry man with a skull tattoo curling up his neck, folded his arms but took a cautious step back. "Who the hell are you people?" he muttered. Hayes didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the gathering crowd that had begun to form. Joggers, park visitors, parents, kids, all drawn to the strange assembly. Phones were already recording. He raised his voice, not to shout, but so that every syllable landed sharp and clear. "You put your hands on Staff Sergeant Elijah Monroe, a decorated Marine who carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire in the jungles of Vietnam. A man who saved 11 American lives while wounded himself. A man who never once asked for thanks." There was a beat of silence, then gasps rippled through the crowd. One biker scoffed, though his voice trembled. "That's just some old man. You're making this up." Major Kim, a stout Korean American with silver hair, stepped forward. From around his neck, he pulled a chain. On it, 2 sets of dog tags and a medal gleaming even under the setting sun. He held up the silver star. "In 1971, Kim said clearly, "this man held off a North Vietnamese regiment while we evacuated. I was barely alive when I got on that bird. He made sure I saw my daughter born." Elijah remained seated, watching silently. His hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't from fear. It was memory, pride, pain. One of the older women in the crowd removed her hat. A man did the same. The moment, caught on camera, a town collectively holding its breath. The skull-tattooed biker looked pale now, eyes darting to the gathering cell phones, the unfamiliar weight of consequence pressing down. "We didn't know," he muttered. Hayes's voice dropped, firm and cutting. "That's the problem. You didn't want to." The youngest biker stepped forward, barely more than a teenager. His voice cracked. "My grandfather, he served too. Vietnam. If he saw what I did today." He stopped, ashamed. Elijah looked at him for a long time. Then, with the grace only the truly strong carry, he spoke. "Then honor him by becoming a man he'd be proud of." The boy lowered his head, speechless. From the final SUV, a uniformed officer emerged. Cradling a polished wooden case, he approached Elijah with formal precision. "Sir," he said, opening the box to reveal a freshly minted silver star. "Your original was reported stolen in 1986. The Department of Defense authorized this replacement. We've been trying to find you." Elijah stared at the medal, chest rising slowly. "I didn't keep it for the medal," he said softly. "I kept it for the memories." And around him, the town began to remember, too. By nightfall, information had spread like an uncontrolled blaze. What commenced as hushed conversations in the park escalated into prominent stories on local news broadcasts. Decorated war hero assaulted in broad daylight. Community unites to honor forgotten Marine. The old church on 9th Street was filled to capacity within the hour. Folding seats lined the walkways. Unfamiliar individuals stood side by side, some still in their work attire, others in uniforms they had not donned in years. The lectern was unassuming, yet the quiet that permeated the space was profound. Elijah occupied the foremost pew, his new silver star affixed to a clean shirt, one borrowed from the church caretaker. His cap resting on his lap, fingers gently clasped over it. Unit V92 was seated behind him like a living barricade, not protectors but brethren. The mayor, accompanied by municipal officials, approached the podium. Her voice quavered somewhat. For 50 years, Elijah Monroe traversed our streets, fueled his own vehicle, sat in solitude in our parks, and we failed to notice him. We never inquired. We simply overlooked him. She paused, surveying the room filled with bowed heads and tear-filled eyes. We neglected to acknowledge the champion in our midst, not merely for his decorations, but for his quiet dignity, his service, and his refusal to allow resentment to fester. When it was Elijah's turn to address the assembly, he rose unhurriedly. The old injuries still pained him, but tonight they felt less burdensome. I requested none of this, he stated plainly. I did not contact my unit for a claim. I contacted them because I needed to recall something I was beginning to forget, that there was a period when we did not abandon individuals. His gaze swept over the crowd, some of whom had passed him by just that morning. I harbor no anger. I opted for a quiet existence. But I implore you now, observe more intently. Look more closely. The individual propelling a shopping cart, the woman seated alone at the bus stop. They possess narratives you will not discover on your mobile devices. A pause, then a murmur of accord rippled through the church. From the rear of the room, a small boy stepped forward, holding wildflowers. My father says true heroes do not boast, he whispered. Elijah accepted the bouquet, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. Your father is correct, he said. And at times, true heroes merely need to be acknowledged. And in that moment, Elijah Monroe was no longer invisible. The subsequent morning, sunlight streamed across the fractured driveway of Elijah Monroe's modest dwelling. Parked beneath the ancient oak tree, his Dodge D100 appeared transformed. As shown, the corrosion had been removed, the indentations smoothed out. The discolored paint had been restored to its original red, not by experts, but by 3 local mechanics who arrived at sunrise, unbidden. One had served in Iraq, another had a grandfather who never returned from Korea. They accepted no payment. Elijah emerged with his walking stick, blinking in the brightness. The same neighborhood that once disregarded him now waved as he went by. A youth on a scooter paused to offer a salute. Across the thoroughfare, Angela, the cleaner, smiled gently from her veranda. On the tailgate of his truck, a new bumper sticker had been meticulously affixed. Simple, bold, proud veteran. Still standing. He gazed at it for an extended period. Colonel Hayes arrived at the driveway in a borrowed sedan. He alighted without ceremony, merely an old acquaintance in a new era. Are you all right? He inquired. Elijah did not respond immediately. He looked upwards at the sky, the clouds drifting like the jungles he once navigated. I believe so, he uttered at last. At times, one must fall to be perceived. Hayes smiled gently. You never fell, brother. You stood taller than most men ever will. We merely forgot to look up. They stood in silence, 2 soldiers distant from their conflict, yet still molded by it. As Unit V92 readied to return to their lives, each man embraced Elijah as if it might be their final encounter. Yet it was not a farewell. It was a salute, to honor, to memory, to a man who never requested to be seen but finally was.